The point is that what God has given to you, if you express gratefulness for it, it will actually begin to transform your life. There's actually a study on this. Robert Emmons is a scholar who studies goal setting and gratitude. And in one of his studies, he put the two of them together. He took a group of students, divided them into 3 subgroups. To the first group, he said, I want you to set some goals that you can accomplish in the next 12 weeks. And then, every week, at the end of the week, I want you to journal 5 occurrences that happened in your life. Just 5 things, 5 experiences that you had. Then to the second group, he said, I want you to set some goals that you can accomplish in 12 weeks. And at the end of the 12 weeks, I want you to journal 5 bad things that happened to you that week. To the third group, he said, write down some goals that you would like to set and accomplish within the next 12 weeks. And then at the end of every week, I want you to write down 5 things from that week that you are grateful for. At the end of the 12-week study, he compiled all of the results. He found 2 things, one of which you might expect and one of which came completely out of the blue. The first one you might expect is this, that the students in the gratitude group were significantly more likely to accomplish their goals than the students in the other 2 groups. But what came completely out of the blue for Robert Emmons was this result. The students in the gratitude group were significantly less likely to have become physically ill during that 12-week period than the students in the other groups. There's actually a Bible verse about this. It says, envy rots the bones. There actually is a physical consequence to envy, and the students in the gratitude group were actually healthier, happier, and more successful because they were grateful. Your response to this is very simple. If you struggle with envy or if you struggle with bitterness, I encourage you to make a list of just the first 20 things that come to your mind that you can be grateful for. Just the first 20 things. Make that list. It will begin a transformational process in your life. Does this make sense to you so far? All right? That's the idea of providence. We spent a lot of time on it. We're going to spend most of the rest of the time we have on this one, on your design. That's the what question. Yeah, a lot of people have this belief that if you are living with purpose, it'll be reflected in the level, in your hyperactivity, right? Hyperactive people are the most purposeful people, and this video kind of shows that, I think. Hopefully the sound will work here. So if that's motivated, what does unmotivated look like? The music may have actually played a trick on us. Because if you think of that little penguin, why was he bouncing around? It is the season of reproduction, and he is not, shall we say, acting purposefully. You say, well, what's the polar bear doing? Does anybody know what the polar bear is doing? The polar bear is hunting. And you say, I don't think so because I've hunted before and I never stick my rear end up in the air like that. Must be something else going on. Well, if you were a polar bear, you would do that while you're hunting because the polar bear is trying to catch seals, and seals can see the polar bear coming because its eyes are black, its nose is black, and its lips are black. So what is the secret? Put your head down on the ground, push yourself along with your hind legs. He collapsed at the very end, not because he had a hangover from the weekend. He collapsed at the end because he was within striking distance of a meal. So sometimes when we think that purpose and hyperactivity somehow go together, we're not properly understanding the idea of energy. I'd like to share with you a simple way of beginning to understand your God-given design and gifting. This is an outline that I picked up from somebody who has studied the same sources and worked with the same group of people that I've worked with on studying and figuring out life purpose issues and helping people on these things. This particular individual is a pastor who wrote a book. His name is Max Lucado, and the book is called Cure for the Common Life. Cure for the Common Life. It's a very simple, easy book. If you're really wrestling through life purpose and at the end of this talk you're motivated to learn more, it's a really easy book for you to pick up and study from. Max, in his book, says there's an acrostic. He calls it the story acrostic. What is your life story? What is the story? What is the narrative of your life experience? And he says, if you use the acrostic story, it's easier to remember the components of it. And he may be right about this. I think it's interesting enough, at least, to propose it to you tonight. So we'll use it. He says S stands for strengths. How you get things done using your unique gifts, your strengths. That God guides you through your strengths, but God also guides you through your weaknesses. There is this Greco-Roman pagan idea that you should be like Mary Poppins, practically perfect in every way. She had no weaknesses because anything that was a weakness for her, she turned it into a strength. You see, that's the idea that the Greeks and the Romans, that's a pagan idea. The Christian idea, we would think more in terms of the body of Christ. And if you want to study this in Scripture, I would encourage you to look up two particular passages in Scripture. I'll give them to you. The first one is Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. It says that don't you know that all the different parts are part of the body, but they all come together in one? The second passage that talks about this, also written by the Apostle Paul, is 1 Corinthians chapter 12. So I would encourage you to take a look at those two passages, because the biblical approach does not seem to be take your weaknesses and turn them into strengths. The biblical approach seems to be identify those whose strengths complement your strengths so that together you can be even stronger. I didn't understand this at first. When I first got my job as a college professor, I went to teach. I immediately found that I had a lot of opportunities to speak, book contract offers coming in. I wanted to write a book, so I would sign them, and then all of a sudden realize I had deadlines coming up. I had papers to grade. I had articles that I was supposed to write. I was doing all these different things, and I don't handle being overwhelmed very well. I just don't handle that very well. My typical response when I'm overwhelmed with something, if I don't know what to do with something, I just throw it away. If I'm overwhelmed, if my desk has got too much stuff on it, I just throw it all away and start over. And you say, that's not good. Oh, well, let me tell you, as a college professor, if a student says, did you grade my paper? And you say, I didn't grade your paper, I threw it away. That's not a correct response. And you say, but you're just telling this for dramatic effect. Listen, I am the only person in the entire history of my college to have to go dumpster diving to find my paycheck. I threw away my paycheck. You say, well, you're obsessive compulsive. Well, I don't know. All I know is I need help. I need somebody to help me organize things, or else it ends up just getting thrown away. I thought you were going to come and speak at our church this weekend. Yeah, I was, but I just threw that away because I didn't want to do it. You just can't have that response. So I needed some help. Here was my problem. I only had enough money to pay a part-time assistant. And I knew if I needed a real help, I would need somebody who could work for me full-time, because any really good assistant could easily get a full-time job. Why would such a person settle for a part-time job? I was thinking about this one day when I wandered out into the hallway outside of my office. Down the hallway walked one of my students who had just graduated. Her name is Elena. I said, Elena, how are you? She said, I'm doing great. I started to, as a professor, you think back, real quick rewind. What did I know about Elena? And I remembered a couple things about her. I remember that she took my class on leadership where we studied personal gifting and design. And so I remembered that a couple things. I remembered, first of all, she had double majored in Christian education and math. I asked her one time, did you double major in Christian education and math because you want to teach math in a Christian school? She said, no, I majored in Christian education because I want to go into ministry. Well, why did you double major in math? She said, because I like it. I resent that. I had math anxiety. I would talk myself into flunking math exams. I could forget all the equations even if I knew them because I was so afraid that I would fail. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I passed my math classes in college, and I passed the statistics classes I took in graduate school, but they were among the least enjoyable things I had ever done. The idea that you would major in college math because you like it was inconceivable to me, but a very memorable fact. So I was there in the hallway. How are you doing, Elena? She said, great. Jeremy and I just got married. I said, well, I'm so happy for you. You're going to be a great couple. She said, well, you know, what's interesting is we've decided to settle here in Dayton. I said, really? So what's Jeremy going to do? He's going to be a building contractor. So eventually I said, so why are you on campus today? She said, I'm here looking for a job. I said, oh, really? I said, well, how's that going for you? She said, not very well. I said, why not? She said, because the problem is I'm helping Jeremy with his bookkeeping for the business, and I can only take a part-time job, and no one seems to want to hire a part-time assistant. I said, Elena, will you come in my office and let me interview you? She came in my office, and I sat in my chair, and the whole time I was thinking, God, just give me an intelligent question to ask. I said, Elena, what does a good day of work look like for you? She said, oh, a good day of work is when I come in the morning and everything is in complete chaos, total disarray, and by the time I leave, I've brought order and structure to it. I was thinking, okay, relax. A good interviewer asks at least 2 questions before saying you're hired. And so I asked her, can you give me an example of that? She said, oh, yes, she said, I love balancing my checkbook. It's like a game, she said, making all of the numbers come out right. I wanted to say, are you for real? Come on. Everybody has to go dumpster diving to find their paycheck. No, God had given Elena this ability to administrate various tasks that she desired to use in the service of a vision. God had given me a big vision and withheld from me the administrative ability to carry out that vision. You say, well, that was really cruel for God to withhold that administrative ability from you. Well, if you're in the Greco-Roman pagan mindset, yes, that was a cruel thing for God to withhold that from me. But in the perspective of the body of Christ, if everybody is a different part of the body and all the parts work together as one, then it made perfect sense for God to give Elena certain gifts and give me certain gifts. And, you know, now she's a mom with 4 kids, 4 little boys. They're very energetic. They keep her very busy. In the afternoon, she puts them down for a quiet time. And do you know what she does to return energy and feel more alive? She gets on the computer and she does Excel spreadsheets for my company. You're like, hold on a second. The 4 little boys wear her out. And what she does to re-energize is Excel spreadsheets. Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. I would never understand that, but she does it, and she does a phenomenal job. This is many, many years later, and she's still able to do that, and it's been a real blessing for me. Second thing, T stands for topics, what you want to work with. In other words, you feel completely absorbed when you get involved in this, whatever it is, be it a person, a group, a car, a concept, food, music, fabric, furniture, or anything else in God's creation. Are there certain topics, certain kinds of things that you like to work with? If you think about it, some people like to work with tools. Some people like to work with other people. Some people like to work with ideas. Some people like to work with concepts. Some people like to work with designs. Some people like to work with buildings. Some people like to work in only certain kinds of spaces. Some people like to create certain kinds of spaces. Some people are more interested in employing things that can create experiences for other people. Others want to have the experiences for themselves and then be able to communicate about those experiences to other people. There would be an infinite number of topics that you could be involved with. So the question then is, are there topics that are more or less godly? Well, probably. I mean, there's some things that you would say you are clearly not going to be something that God would put you into. I don't think that God would put you into a position where you feed addictions for other people that would be negative, right? I just don't think God would do that. I don't think God would put you in a position where you would intentionally try to inflame lust in other people. I don't think God would put you in a position where you use other people in order to benefit yourself. But there are a whole lot of things out there. I mean, God uses interior designers. God uses people who do all kinds of things. God uses musicians. God uses people who are involved in the arts. God uses people who are engineers and involved in architecture, mathematicians, and all sorts of people in addition to the ones that seem more obvious, like theologians and, say, politicians or people who get involved in social issues and things like that. Does this make sense to you? God uses these kinds of people in all sorts of situations. What's the trick for you? The trick for you is that it's very hard to figure out what topic you should work on, because most people think that the topic they should work on is what they found as the result to their aptitude test they took in high school. I never fell for this, by the way. I never fell for this, because in high school, I was the skinniest kid, 130 pounds, 6'1", and I got my results back, and they said, "You should be a lumberjack." I remember thinking, should I send them a picture? Visualize me wielding a chainsaw and send me new results. I began asking my students at Bryan College, what did your career test say that you should be? It was funny how some of the results came out. The guy who was there was a guy in our class, I said, well, what did your career test say? He said, I really don't want to talk about it. And it was funny that he said that, because he was kind of the class clown, always cutting up, is an athlete, good musician. In fact, he's still kind of a cut-up, which is really funny. Have you seen the commercials for freecreditscore.com? Yeah. Okay, that is my student. I mean, that is not metaphorically my student. That is that student, okay? He is the goofiest band guy that there is, okay? And it's just on purpose, we'll do things that are funny just to make people laugh. So I said, so what did your career test say that you should be? And he said, my career test said I should be a flower arranger. Exactly. The whole class just busted up because we couldn't believe it. Now, if God calls you to be a flower arranger, then be one. But don't believe that just because your career test says that's what you should be. All right. Does that make sense to you? What are you going to do? How are you going to find the topic? Here's the strategy, and I know this is going to sound strange to you. I recommend that you write down 15 to 25 stories of things you have accomplished that gave you a great sense of satisfaction. Write down 15 to 25 stories. Each story could only be 2 or 3 sentences long. The length of the story is not the key. The idea is that you have a whole bunch of them, thinking as far back in your life as you can, of things that you accomplished that gave you a great sense of satisfaction. And by the way, if you're saying to me, Dr. Myers, I haven't accomplished anything, I want you to stop using other people's definitions of accomplishment. What we're talking about here is what returns energy to you and makes you feel more alive, not what returns energy to a friend of yours who's energized by something totally different. Are we clear on that? Because those things, you remember when you were a little kid, you did something, you created some kind of a play situation, and you thought, that was really cool. I was very clever to do that. And it's not boastful to think that. You just realize, I think there might be a reason why that was of particular interest to me. For me, I would draw things growing up, and I found that from a young age, I didn't just draw pictures of like a car. I would draw the car as if it was the cutaway view of the car. So you could see the engine, the steering column, the person sitting in the seat, and all of that. And then when I started drawing houses, I never drew a house, with the windows and smoke coming out of the chimney. I drew the house from the top, looking down in it as if you took the roof off and you could see the architectural design on the inside. I did that from the time I was a little kid. That's meaningful. That shows something. It means that, for instance, when I take that idea with my teaching gift together, I realize, I'm interested in space. I think in terms of space. I don't think in terms of just point 1, point 2, point 3. I think in terms of, for example, when I teach, I imagine that it's a canvas, so to speak, and that we're filling out the space by helping to explain each of the ideas that would be necessary to fill that space and make sense of it. That's how I operate. I think of it as an architectural task. And believe me, if I were not a professor, if I were not involved in the consulting business, I would be just as happy buying old buildings and remodeling them as I would be doing anything else. I've done that too in my life and thoroughly enjoyed it. So sometimes it's the topic, but don't get just stuck on that. Because I know somebody might say, well, you know, soccer, that's my life, so I have to be a soccer player or a soccer coach or something. Not necessarily. What is it about soccer that really compels you might be something that you would think about in terms of those stories. O stands for optimal conditions. The conditions in our environment that make things best for us. In other words, what are those kinds of things? In what situations do you really feel that source of energy? Have you ever had an experience where you worked at something that was so fascinating to you that you literally lost track of time? You just didn't even think about where you were anymore. You were just so focused in on it. You absolutely loved it. Go back to those kinds of experiences and try to figure out what was happening in that condition. What was I doing in that condition that might be different from what other people were doing in that condition? And as you learn to train yourself to think that way, you begin to observe new things about yourself and about your environment. R stands for relationships. What kind of role and relationship to others do you seek in the task? Everybody's got a little bit of a different perspective. Some people like to be a part of a team. Some people like to be a part of a team that is pursuing an adventure. Other people like to be a part of a team that is solving problems. Other people like to be a part of a team that is responding to emergencies. Some people like to be the lead person on the team. I always thought whenever I would watch the Final Four basketball tournament, it always made me so nervous when it came right down to the last second and one person had to take the ball and shoot. Because I wasn't much of a basketball player. It always seemed to me, man, I would hate to have been the person who had been given the ball at that last second. Everything rides on me. But if you talk to people who really love the game of basketball and are successful at it, they're all saying, give me the ball. If everything rides on this shot, I want to be the one to make it. They have a whole different approach to how they work with other people than I do. Some people like to serve. You might say, I don't want to be that person who's in charge, but I want to be the person, you think of Moses. Remember the story in the Bible of Moses? They were fighting a battle, and whenever Moses held his arms up like this, his side would win the battle, and whenever his arms got tired and he put them down to his side would lose the battle. And so there were two individuals came along and lifted up his arms and held his arms up in the air. And some of you say, I like that. I would rather be that. I'd rather be the person who holds up Moses' arms than be the Moses. And others of you are like, no way, I want to be the Moses. Or I want to be one of those generals down there actually on the field. People want to work with others in different ways, and there are a lot of valid ways to do that. And finally, Y stands for yes. You achieve this joyous affirmation when you fulfill the purpose for which you were designed. That's the yes experience. How would you know you have it? Here's some questions that can help you. What are some experiences where you've accomplished something that returned energy to you and made you feel more alive? What are the experiences at the end of which you said, yes, that was really good. I liked that. That motivated me. It was hard, but I succeeded with it. I was very happy with the outcome. I would do that again. That's the kind of experience we're looking at. It's kind of fun to think about this in terms of your actual career, too. Because, listen, I understand. Look, I want my kids to get a job. I want them to provide for themselves. I don't want them to live at home for the rest of their lives. And so I, as a dad, say the same kind of thing you probably have heard other people say. I mean, my daughter Emma came to me and said, oh, Papa, I want to be an artist when I grow up. and the only thing I can hear her say is, Papa, I'm going to live in the basement for the rest of my life. Because everybody knows all artists starve. Or do they? What if, because here's the thing. I know better, but every part of my being wants to say, oh, honey, why don't you go ahead and get your nursing degree so that you have something to, say it with me, fall back on. But why would I encourage my daughter to spend $100,000 and 5 crucial years of her life pursuing her fallback position? What could she do with that amount of time and that amount of money to pursue the thing that God actually designed her to do? Do you see where I'm going with this? It's a very different way of thinking. Most people in society have never thought this way. And by the way, if your parents are worried that you won't get a job, they will start thinking this way. They'll put want ads, they'll circle things and put it on top of your plate at breakfast times. Like, get a job, make money, move out of the house. You see, but they want to know that you actually have the initiative to provide for yourself. What I'm saying to you is, what if you could ask God, would you show me how this design that you've given to me could also be a means of provision for me and for my family? And spend a lot of time thinking about that and see what God does. I know of an artist who found that he could, instead of making paintings that might or might not sell, he would go to clients who he guaranteed would be happy with their work because they were building multi-million-dollar homes and they wanted frescoed ceilings. They wanted their children's rooms to be painted with scenes from, Lion King and all these kinds of things. And so he's the one who could do all these paintings. He charged a lot of money for it because he was very good at it and he was very much in demand. So he became I'll put it this way. He earned a very comfortable salary as an artist, working in air-conditioned comfort inside multi-million-dollar homes with people who were absolutely delighted with his work. What a glorious thing for an artist to be. Now, I'm not saying if you're an artist, that's what you're going to do. He just started out, instead of saying, okay, instead of my art just being my hobby, what if this is so compelling to me that I absolutely feel I've got to do this? And so now I begin asking the question, how could this kind of thing be a means of provision for me? What kinds of things do you like to work with and in what situations? What are some things that trigger you into action? This is a whole new way of thinking about design. But we've got one more point to get to, and it's this. It's the how. You've got to get to work. You've got to get to work. Jeff Colvin wrote a book called Talent is Overrated. He asked the question, what really explains high performance? Let me tell you, in my own words, my conclusion after reading this book and several others like it, my conclusion is this. Talent is distressingly common. Hard work is rare. Talent is distressingly common, but hard work is rare. You're a very talented group of students. You probably just looked around and started to realize, there's some people here who they're smart. They do some amazing things. Well, so do you. You have amazing things that you do. This kind of group is not the norm. You came here because at least somebody believed that you could be the kind of person who could be a leader to make a difference in the world rather than just contributing further to the problems. So that sets you apart as a group. But what will further set you apart is not your talent. What will set you apart is how hard you are willing to work to make that talent turn into something. Jeff Colvin specifically gives 5 things. First of all, improvement. Second, repetition. Third, feedback. Fourth, thoughtfulness. And fifth, rigor. Let me explain each one of them. First is improvement. I worked with teachers a lot for a lot of my life. I've worked with tens of thousands of teachers. And one thing we found in our studies is that the average teacher plateaus after just 3 years of being a teacher. Do you know what I mean by plateau? They grow for the first 3 years of teaching, and they get to the place where they've got all their lesson plans, and then they just level off. They don't grow anymore. Well, how can teachers who are not growing prepare students to grow? That's one of the big problems we have in education today. So helping them continually want to improve, always growing, always learning new things. Second is repetition, finding the things that work and doing those things over and over again. This explains the success of so many people. You probably would find this hard to believe. You know of a president named Ronald Reagan. You may not know that in 1964, Ronald Reagan got on national television and gave a speech called A Time for Choosing. The speech was brilliant. It took the nation by storm. And a lot of people thought, man, that's incredible. That guy just showed up on TV and gave this unbelievable speech. How long had he been preparing the speech? Well, it was essentially the speech he had given at General Electric plants, factories all over the country to these factory workers. He had given that speech in one form or another probably 100 or 200 times. And every time he found out what people laughed at, he kept that in. Every time he found the things that people really thought about more, he would keep that in. The things that didn't make so much sense, he would take those things out. And it, in essence, became the stump speech of his life. His whole career was based on the principles that he outlined in that one speech. Does that make sense to you? He found what really worked and he kept it. Third is the feedback. You've got to get feedback from somebody else. If you're trying to learn a golf swing and you do it wrong, it doesn't matter if you do it wrong 1,000 times, you'll still be doing it wrong. In fact, it's harder and harder to do it right the more you do it wrong. You've got to have a coach, somebody to show you how to do it properly. Fourth is thoughtfulness. This one really got to me. Because you see, I've started to learn some things living in Colorado about elite runners. I've noticed that elite runners are different kinds of people. First of all, they're just genetic freaks. They just are. They can run to the top of Pikes Peak with a smile on their face. Most people just crawl to the top of Pikes Peak. Or they drive there, and eat donuts and watch the people who run there. But I like to run. I do. Well, no, I don't. I don't really like to run. I like what running does for me. I like the energy level that it gives to me, but I don't like the actual process of running. So when I run, I put on headphones and play music so my body cannot talk to me. When I'm running, my body says, "What are you doing?" I'm running. Why? I don't know. Well, where are you going? I don't know. Then what's the hurry? So I have to put on the headphones so that I can't hear my body say all that stuff to me. But have you ever noticed elite runners never wear headphones? They're not trying to tune out what their body says. They're trying to tune into what their body says. They're paying attention to their heart rate. They're paying attention to their lung capacity. They're paying attention to their energy level. They're paying attention to their stride. They're paying attention to their posture because they know that success comes from thoughtfulness, not from mindlessness. And then the final point is rigor, just plain hard work. That would be my final encouragement to you. Ted Williams became one of the greatest baseball hitters of all time, not just by being talented as a baseball hitter. He certainly was. But he went to the batting cage in practice until his hands bled and he could no longer hold the bat. You'll always find people who are really successful at something, there's always some real hard work they did that went behind it all. And they continue to work very, very hard. Even people who are, big stars and things, you think, well, that person must have a really easy life. Have you any idea how many hours a day some of these people work? Traveling from one place to the next, doing this, getting involved in all of these things. Some of them work 18 to 20 hours a day, very hard, and they're making very difficult decisions all the time. Should I pursue this option? Should I pursue that option? All of these kinds of things. They have people who help them. They have to discern, is this person really wanting to help me, or is this person just trying to trade in on my skills and all of that kind of thing? It's a difficult world, but the people who succeed are the ones who are really willing to work very, very hard to the point of rigorous activity. So think back over what we talked about tonight. We started out by asking the question, how can we be like those sled dogs? How can we be excited whether the work is hard or whether it is easy? How can we stop listening to the noise that the culture is giving to us so that we can hear the whisper that God gives to us? And I got to tell you, I think for many of you, for most of you, I would say, God has already begun to reveal to you some of those things. But you've got to pay attention to what God says is important, not to what the world says is important. And that's hard to do. I had a student come to me one time and say, "Dr. Myers, I'm going to drop out of school for a semester and find myself." And without even thinking about it, I just said, "Well, what if you're not there?" And he looked at me like that was the most rude thing I could possibly have said. But I explained to him, I said, "I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude. I just want to point out the possibility that if you run off to California to find yourself, you may actually be running away from God's design rather than closer to it. How are you going to find that kind of wise counsel?" Well, that's a topic we're going to take up at another time in the summit here. But for now, we have a better understanding of how to pursue God's will. Begin doing things that are redeemed passions. Begin focusing on the design that God gave to you and how that works with the design of other people, and be ready to really get to work. Make sense?